Finally, after all of these years, we figured out a way to play Chaos Greed in GOAT format. Now listen to this man. To show you how it's done.
This card is a really cool card, and we've been working on this deck
for a long time. Over a year, probably 13 to 14 months. Me and Jackson started working on it back in the fall of last year. And a few months ago when we were in Texas at a GOAT tournament, we were just like, man, on the way back, we were like, how can we make this work? And this was like 3 months ago. And really since then, we've been kind of like standing on our heads trying to figure out how to do this. And I've been playing this deck almost nonstop on like Dueling Book and just kind of casually with friends and stuff. Haven't taken it to a tournament yet, but I'm going to soon. So Chaos Greed is a really cool card. You guys have probably seen this card in your bulk or whatever, which is, the main way that I kind of figure out decks to play like that are way out in left field, like in GOAT format or whatever. At cards that are within the time frame.
Yeah. It was like, I was looking through bulk one day and I found this card. So this is definitely one of those instances. But Chaos Greed, I'm going to just run a guess through this card. So what it says is you can activate this card when there are 4 more cards removed from play and there are no cards in your graveyard. Okay, so you have to have 4 or more cards banished, no cards in your grave. Draw 2 cards. It's 3 extra copies of Pot of Greed, and it's a really cool card. And what really
the problem with it though is that once you activate one, there's a copy of
you can't activate 2.
Yeah, you can't activate 2 more.
You can't activate 2 in your graveyard now. Yeah. Until recently, until we decided to, we were looking over one card for the longest time, and then once we added that card, it really just pushed this deck over the top to where it could actually be like competitive and actually make this work. So, but anyway, so yeah, you want to have cards that are banished, but you don't want to have any cards in your grave, and that's what this whole deck kind of revolves around. You play 3 extra copies of Pot of Greed. It's really cool, and you're actually able to really just out resource your opponent easily. The cards that have been in this deck for the first 7 versions of this deck, where it's always these 4 cards because they were not only beaters, but they could go 1-for-1 with your opponent, but while at the same time like banishing cards. So they never like really hit the grave. So DD Warrior Lady is obviously good because if it's in defense during battle, it doesn't matter. You can still choose to activate its effect. DD Assailant has to be an attack in order for it to. It can, I guess, be. You can run this into your opponent's monster, I guess is what I'm saying, and then choose to clear it regardless. But if your opponent's in defense and running in with this, doesn't really do the same thing. But if your opponent's wanting to get damage in, then you can clear with this. You'll take a little bit, but if they're trying to get at your life points, then they have to turn stuff to attack. And then, or you can just like attack over your opponent's monsters and then wait for them to go 1-for-1 with this card later. But yeah, these pretty much just clear themselves. They banish themselves and your opponent's monster most of the time, and that really kind of just plays well with Chaos Greed because not only are you able to just be aggressive, go 1-for-1, and banish cards, but it kind of just feeds into like the idea of Chaos Greed. So those 4 monsters have always been kind of in the deck no matter what. The next card that I decided to play in this build, and this was the one that really just I feel like kind of had pushed this deck over the top. Banisher of Light, which is cool. So I'm gonna I guess walk you guys through this card, really why it's good. There's tons of reasons why this card's great, but so the idea is to get this card in face-up defense, and the easiest way to do that is to just set it and then have your opponent run into it with just about anything. Most monsters in GOAT can't run over this, so they'll flip it up and then throwing it everywhere, and they'll flip it up and then yeah, and this is great because you want all your stuff banished, but at the same time against the majority of decks in GOAT format, if you have like a walking Macrocosmos on the field, like their deck's just gonna like eat shit, especially Chaos. If you're playing against Chaos, but everybody's playing things like Premature, Magician of Faith, Call the Haunted, things that utilize the graveyard.
Master of Darkness, etc.
Yeah, dude, so many things, and so yeah, this card's just really good for that. But what you do is you want to set it. And then if they knock it, then that's cool because then you just have another banished card and it's, whatever. So we played 3 copies of this, and it's got 2,000 defense, and like I said, most of the stuff can't attack over it. So they'll just run into it, and then it's face up, and then, then you can kind of go on with it. But so what this did is this card kind of solved our Chaos Greed problem, because the only problem we had left with the deck for like a long time was after you activate one of these, then you'll have this one in the grave. You can't activate 2 in a row, but if this card is on the field, then you activate this, you can draw 2 cards, then Chaos Greed gets removed from play, and then no cards are in your graveyard still. So then you can just keep activating, 2 copies or whatever. If you activate 3 in a turn, most likely you have to discard at the end phase, so you won't usually activate 3. Unless you just like top deck this, and then the only card you have on the field is this. But yeah, so this card pretty much fixed our Chaos Greed problem, and then we ended up moving some ratios around with some other cards. But so yeah, that's the deck so far. And then we've got 2 copies of Capsule. Now this is another card that you've probably seen in your bulk, probably here and there over the last decade and a half. And what this card does is select 1 card from your deck, remove it from play face down. During your second standby phase after the activation, destroy this card and then add the removed card to your hand. Okay, so I'm going to say more than one thing about this card. So when you activate it, it's a spell card that doesn't go immediately to the grave. That's really good. And then also it banishes a card, monster, spell, whatever, face down. It can be any card, which is also really cool. So you can like search Graceful Charity with this card, or any monster, any spell, literally any card in your deck. So it'll banish a card face down. And it doesn't put it in the grave, which is really cool. And then whenever you finally do get the monster, it goes to your hand. Again, keeps it out of the grave. And then if your opponent decides to destroy this somehow with anything other than like Mobius, Breaker, whatever. So if they use like Dust Tornado, MST, Heavy Storm, whatever, then it's still a 1-for-1. And I know that sounds really just, kind of crazy, but you really just want to make sure you're doing 1-for-1s and then plussing where you can, and then just, beating over your opponent with stuff I'll show you here in a little bit. But yeah, this card's really good because you're able to just search out the cards that you need to be able to beat your opponent. If it's the beginning of the game and I have this card, then I just go for this card. And because this can really just like mess up your opponent. Yeah, it can mess up your opponent from the beginning of the game. You don't want to play 2, or I'm sorry, you don't want to play 3 because you never want to have 2 of this card at the same time. Like if you're waiting on 2 of these to resolve, then like you're really behind. You're really behind. And then but you only want to play 1 after each other because you don't want to play 2 at the same time. But so it makes it to where you just have a dead card in your hand the whole entire time that the other 2 turns that this one is resolving. So with my luck, dude, if I'm ever searching this card like the draw phase before the standby that I get this back, I always draw another copy of this, so then I'll have 2 in my hand. It's kind of annoying. But we side the third if your opponent is not playing things like Heavy Storm or whatever. There's been a couple instances where I put the third in. So yeah, that card's really, really cool. And like I said, it keeps things banished. There's been times where I've had 3 cards banished and I needed to activate Chaos Greed, and then I activated Capsule, and then it banished another card for me, even if it's face down, and then activate Chaos Greed, and it just kind of gets that 4th one for me. And then also if they destroy this, it just leaves the monster banished, so it just permanently leaves it banished, and that's whatever, or the card. So that's why you don't really want to try to search things like Graceful Charity. You want to try to search like a monster that you play multiples of. But okay, so we play next just cards that really help keep stuff out of our grave. Obviously Bazoo. This is your main beat stick in the deck. It gets bigger than most, pretty much anything in your deck. It can beat it can get to 25, and you play no traps, you play nothing but spells and monsters. And that's why we also play this card right here, is because you play 3 and 3. This one banishes your spells, this one banishes your monsters.
Supers? That's awesome.
Yeah, 2 supers, yeah, and then 1 common. But so this on paper is the same thing as Bazoo. This can banish 2 spells, and this can get up to 2,000. This can banish 3 monsters and get up to 25. This can beat over just about anything. It can beat over, Chaos Sork, Jinzo, Monarchs, Parshath, just any other beat stick pretty much. And this can almost do the same thing. It just beats over the 1800s and the 1600s, I guess, just the other beat sticks that main decks play. But yeah, 3 and 3 you want to max out because you want to try to keep stuff out of your grave. And yeah, this is actually a Rota target, which is really cool. You play 7 Rota targets in the deck because of all the DDs and then these. So you play 2 Rotas. What's really cool is after you activate Rota, then Gustav can actually banish the Rota, so it doesn't like affect you too much. And then yeah, so those are the beat sticks of the deck. And then next we play 3 copies of Magician of Faith. Okay, so I'm gonna say a few things about this. Magician of Faith is really, really, really great at this deck. It's amazing in this deck. Also, it's great at 3. So you want to play 3 copies of this card because it can bring things out of the grave, which is really good. And then if they end up knocking this, then you banish 2 other copies from your deck, and then you're like 75% of the way there of having this card completely just being able to be utilized in the deck. But with that being said, I like to set a lot of my
monsters that, you know, I end up drawing just so I can try to burn my opponent's knocks so that they don't knock these. But if they end up knocking these, then that's cool. Like I said earlier, they just end up banishing your monster, which you kind of want. But yeah, you deck them by 3. This card's really good because, like I said, it just brings stuff out of the grave. There's been so many instances where like all I had in grave was like 1 Chaos Greed, because that's just what happens in this deck sometimes. Like you'll have no cards in your grave except for 1 Chaos Greed, and you can't activate it. But you'll flip this, and then you can return the 1 Chaos Greed to your hand, and then you have nothing in the grave, and then you can go ahead and activate this again. Yes. So yeah, 3 Magician of Faith is really good in this deck. I really dig that card. Play 3 Book of Moon for a lot of different reasons. One being because obviously we play things like Magician of Faith, and you can try to abuse it that way. Another reason is because, I mean, just standard stuff for GOAT, because like if your opponent activates Ring, Sakuratsu, Mirror Force, Chaos Sorcerer's Effect to banish or whatever on any of your monsters, Book of Moon literally outs any of that shit. Also, Go Control is probably, you don't really have any bad matchups, but Go Control is decently, you know, just playable against your deck, and it doesn't really hurt it too much. Especially for the fact that, you know, Thousand Eyes can just soak up any of these face down. So Book of Moon can just out the Thousand Eyes, and then just try to run over it with anything, really. Yeah, I just really like 3 Book of Moon in this deck. Another reason that I want to point out is that sometimes you'll get to where you're in like main phase 1, and then these cards were left over from the turn before. You can banish something with Bazoo, like 3 monsters with Bazoo, for instance, and then you can activate Book of Moon, flip the Bazoo face down, and then like say there's monsters in your grave that need to get banished so that you can activate Chaos Greed, then you can take care of another 3. So technically you can banish 6 in 1 turn or 4 in 1 turn with this if you have Book of Moon, if that makes sense. So, because it was flipped face down, and obviously you can use its effect again when it's flipped face up. And then we play 2 copies of Tsukiyomi. Tsukiyomi's good because obviously, you know, Go Control, and it goes back to your hand, doesn't go to the grave. Tsukiyomi can abuse things with, you know, Faith, and we also play Knock in this deck. Suki Knock obviously can just out like pretty much any monster in the game, but Tsukiyomi goes back to your hand, and it's just one of those cards that doesn't really go to the grave unless you're attacking with it, but you're not really ever attacking with it. So if you just utilize it the right way, then you can just really kind of grind out your opponent and you know, get +1s on them all the time. Next we play Serpent. This was weird. I like this card's okay. It just keeps going back to your hand, like if you're pitching it off of like Charity and stuff. I'll set it sometimes just to, you know, try to bait on my opponent's knocks, but it doesn't stay in the grave is the whole point of it. You know what I mean? So it's a card that removes itself from the grave if it is in the grave.
And it's a chum blocker, so
exactly.
It saves life points and it doesn't stay in the graveyard.
Exactly, yeah. And the main thing is that it doesn't stay in the grave, and you can just pitch it, you know, off of things like, you know, Charity, or obviously if your opponent has Duo, or, you know, any of that kind of stuff. So, and then next, okay, Premature is probably MVP spell of this deck, because not only can you get whatever you want out of your grave, but you could get things out of your grave. Like you can get monsters out of your grave that can remove other monsters, or you can get monsters out of your grave that can remove spells. And it's a equip, so whenever it's a spell that when you activate it, it doesn't go anywhere. It's like it stays on the field, kind of like Capsule. It doesn't go straight to the grave. And these things really do matter.
Goes, then it
right.
goes, yeah.
But these things really do matter because, like, if I don't know how to put this. Like, if there's just certain situations where like you just don't need that 1 card in your grave to be able to activate Chaos Greed, or like if you have just 1 spell in your grave and you just really need to revive this to banish that 1 spell to activate Chaos Greed, or if it's a monster or something. A lot of times I will activate Premature and then bring back like Faith, and then I'll either flip down the Faith with Book of Moon or Tsukiyomi. I like doing that too, but it really just kind of depends on, you know, the situation. You do really good job at keeping cards out of your grave with pretty much all the cards in this deck. Snatch Steal, because you're just able to, you know.
Yeah, missed that.
Yeah. These because you need them. It's just Pot of Greed.
Yeah,
whatever.
Game,
so these, you know, I'm saving for last. These are your side out cards. Sangan's good because, you know, you can search whatever you want. You know,
one
pretty
upstart,
much.
Though.
One upstart because I had 2 in this deck, but I took out the second upstart for a third Gustav last time that I kind of edited this deck. Yeah. These are your side out cards, and these go good with the deck, but they're not like needed for like the strategy. So yeah, and let's get onto the side. I don't have like a ton of. I think I have 10 cards on the side because that's all I've found that's actually useful. The cards just the deck's just kind of anti-meta to begin with, and you don't really want to change too much in it because the build's like damn near perfect. So, but if you're playing against Chaos, then I will side out these 3 because most Chaos decks won't play a ton of back row, and then these 2 are just you're able to side out these.
Makes sense.
And then third one of this, if your opponent's not playing Heavy Storm, some people don't. Or some people side it out if like they realize that you're playing like literally hardly any back row. Breaker, if your opponent's playing siding like Necro Valley or any other. Okay, Necro Valley is probably the main thing that I look for when I side in because Necro Valley will shut your shit down quick, and you do not want to see that. Yeah, Breaker is just it's a beat stick that just kind of outs back row. This is good because it goes back to your hand. Same, concept is Tsukiyomi. It doesn't go to the grave unless you attack with it, which you do, but you just really want to try to clear out your opponent's goat tokens. I will side out Sangan for this during goat control. Smashing Ground, just 1 copy. I'll side out like Upstart or something for this. It's for Chaos or Monarchs or whatever. And then you have just a tiny toolbox because you play 2 copies of Rhoda. You can side out any of your warriors for any of these.
And have like a flip killer, a chaos killer, or
then,
an anything killer.
Right. I'll side this in against Go Control. I'll side this in against, honestly, man, like, I've only sided in against once against Chaos. I'd rather side this in against Chaos.
People like Chaos players have caught on to that, and so they don't put their Zorks in defense all the time. Just by default anymore. Yeah.
So yeah, that's the whole point of the deck. The whole point of the deck is just keep cards out of your grave. Banish as much as you can, and then try to go 1-for-1 with your opponent as much as you can. And you're actually able to keep up with like just about any deck in the meta. It's pretty fun. So you're able to beat over a lot of things because your guys can get really big, and you're able to just really just like go anti-meta on your opponent with Banisher because Banisher really just shuts so much shit down. And that's it. It's a fun deck. If you're looking for something fun to play, I would highly recommend this deck. I'm gonna take it to tournament soon, and we'll reprofile it later if we do good with it. So yeah, that's it.
So that is how you play Chaos Greed.
Yep.
You play all the good banishing cards in the format and try to get Chaos Greed.
Yep.
That's
Pretty much. That's it. So thanks for watching, guys.